He left her behind, only to find her years later, holding the hand of a little girl who looked exactly like him. Liam Blake didn't believe in coincidences, he believed in control, in calculated outcomes, in things going exactly according to plan. So when the invitation to a high-profile charity gala landed in his inbox, he accepted without thinking much of it. It was just another evening of handshakes, networking, and polite smiles. A tax write-off in a designer suit. He hadn't expected anything different. But the universe had other plans. The event was held at the Metropolitan Art Hall, a place he hadn't visited in years. As he stepped out of his sleek black car, everything around him felt sterile and scripted, just the way he liked it. Until he stepped inside. The crowd was thick with familiar faces from the business world, journalists, politicians, and socialites dressed to impress. He was halfway through a conversation with a venture capitalist about offshore investments when a flash of movement caught his eye across the room. A woman, standing near the marble staircase, with a little girl clutching her hand. The child's laugh was light, unfiltered, and full of life. And the woman, her, Emily. He hadn't seen her in 4 years, not since the night she left without slamming the door or shedding a single tear. That night had haunted him. She had looked at him with more silence than fury, said, "You were with her," and walked away. He hadn't chased her. He had stood in the middle of his apartment, paralyzed by the truth of what he'd done, and watched her disappear. He thought time would dissolve her memory. He was wrong. Now, standing in this lavish room surrounded by crystal chandeliers and empty conversation, she was right there. Her hair was longer, darker. Her frame smaller than he remembered, like life had asked too much of her. But her eyes were still the same, clear, stormy, blue-gray like a sky before rain. The child by her side looked up at her, then turned toward Liam, and something inside him stilled. The girl's eyes were the same shade of blue as his. Her hair, a dark, almost black-brown. Something about her expression, curious, observant, serious, made his heart falter. He stepped toward them, pulse racing, but Emily noticed first. Her body stiffened immediately, and she instinctively pulled the girl a little closer. Her gaze locked with his. She didn't smile. Didn't blink. Just watched him like a threat she had prepared for. When he finally stood in front of her, his throat dry, he tried to find words that wouldn't come out rehearsed. "Emily," he said, low and unsure. She stared at him, unmoved. "Liam." Her voice was calm, flat, too even. "It's been a long time." He nodded. "I didn't expect to see you here." She tilted her head slightly. "No. I'm sure you didn't." His eyes drifted toward the child, but before he could ask anything, Emily cut him off. "Don't," she said sharply. "She's not yours." The sentence hit him with the force of a car crash. He didn't react at first. Just stood there, blinking, as if he had misheard her. "Emily." "No," she said again, firmer this time. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. You don't get to ask. You don't get to wonder. You lost that right a long time ago." He looked down at the girl again. She stared back at him, silent, curious, unaware of the storm passing between the adults in front of her. "She looks," he began, but Emily shook her head. "She's not yours," she repeated. "Good night, Liam." And just like that, she turned away. No drama. No scene. Just her retreating figure and the soft sound of a child's shoes clicking against the marble floor as they disappeared into the crowd. Liam stood frozen, surrounded by wealth, power, and people who didn't even notice he was unraveling. The gala continued without him, music playing on, glasses clinking in celebration of causes no one really cared about. But inside him, something had shifted. Something real. And for the first time in years, Liam Blake didn't feel in control. He felt regret. He felt loss. And he felt something terrifyingly close to hope. The days following the gala passed in a blur for Liam. He went through the motions of running his company, attending board meetings, signing off on investment proposals, and giving the same polished speeches that always earned him a room's applause. But none of it settled him. Nothing distracted him from the image of Emily standing in that hall, her hand wrapped protectively around the little girl's, her voice cutting and cold as she told him, without hesitation, that the child wasn't his. He tried convincing himself to let it go. She had made her decision. She had walked away. And if that girl truly wasn't his daughter, then this should have ended there. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just Emily, the girl. Her eyes. Her quiet intensity. The unspoken familiarity in her expression that rattled him more than he cared to admit. That night had stirred something deep inside him that refused to quiet. He didn't know if it was guilt, or longing, or something even more terrifying, instinct. For the first time in years, Liam left the office early. He sat alone in his penthouse, staring at old photos he hadn't looked at since the breakup. Emily smiling at the beach. Emily with her hair wet from the rain, wrapped in one of his old sweaters. Emily asleep on his chest in the early days, before he messed everything up. Back then, he'd been building his empire, climbing every ladder in sight, convincing himself that love would wait while he chased legacy. But time hadn't waited. And neither had she. Unable to shake the feeling, he found himself reaching out to someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Mason, an old mutual friend who still moved in some of the same circles as Emily. He didn't ask directly, didn't mention the child. Instead, he casually brought up the gala and said he'd seen someone he hadn't expected. Mason hesitated at first, then said what Liam didn't want to hear but needed to know. Yeah. Emily's been through a lot. Single mom. Strong as hell. She's working as a nurse now. Not easy, but she's doing okay. Her daughter's name is Chloe. Cute kid. That name echoed in Liam's mind long after the call ended. Chloe. A name he'd never heard, but suddenly couldn't forget. He sat in his car later that night, parked across from a small clinic on the quiet end of the city where Mason said Emily worked. He hated himself for being there. It felt invasive. But he couldn't stay away. He waited until just before closing, and then he saw her. Emily stepped out through the front doors, wearing pale scrubs, her hair pulled into a tired bun, looking completely unlike the confident woman he'd seen at the gala. She looked exhausted. Real. Human. A few seconds later, Chloe emerged from the staff entrance, holding the hand of a kind-faced older woman, probably a coworker helping with childcare. Chloe saw Emily and ran into her arms. She laughed as she was scooped up, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck, and Emily smiled, a real smile, soft and warm, the kind Liam remembered from another life. That was the moment he realized what scared him most. It wasn't that the child might not be his. It was that she might be. That Emily had been raising her alone. That he had missed years, first steps, first words, scraped knees and bedtime stories. The thought of it hollowed something in his chest. He could deal with pain. He could deal with regret. But the idea of a daughter he didn't know? That shattered him. The next morning, he didn't go to the office. Instead, he walked into a quiet coffee shop near the clinic with a single goal: to see her again. To talk to her like a human being, without pride, without defense. When Emily walked in with Chloe, both of them bundled in jackets against the wind, Liam stood up from his seat near the window. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here, Liam?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "I'm not here to fight," he said, lifting his hands slightly. I wanted to talk. Just for a minute." Emily looked down at Chloe, who was busy peering at the pastry case, then back at him. You don't get to show up in our lives now and ask for anything. I'm not asking, he said carefully. I just want the truth. Her jaw tensed. You already heard it. I don't believe it, he said softly. And I think you don't believe it either. Emily stared at him. For a moment, Liam thought she might tell him to leave. But then Chloe tugged at her hand and asked for a muffin, breaking the tension. Fine, Emily said at last. 10 minutes. But not here. They stepped outside. The wind was sharp, and Chloe clutched a warm muffin as they walked. Liam glanced at the little girl beside her, his chest aching with the weight of everything he didn't know about her. Why did you lie? He asked, his voice raw. Emily didn't answer at first. Then she said, because you already made your choice once. I wasn't going to give you the chance to walk away again. Liam swallowed. You're right. I made a mistake. The biggest one of my life. But I'm not walking away now. Emily's eyes were tired but steady. It's not just about me anymore. You don't get to show up and expect a door to open. I don't expect anything, he said. But I'll keep showing up anyway. And with that, she walked away again, hand in hand with Chloe. But this time, she didn't look over her shoulder in anger. She looked back, just once, and her eyes said something else. Not goodbye. Not yet. Liam began to rearrange his life in ways he hadn't thought himself capable of. For a man who once thrived on structure, precision, and detachment, his days started to blur with a kind of restless energy he couldn't explain. Every morning he found himself near the clinic, not to interfere, not to confront, but simply to be close, to remind her that he wasn't disappearing again. He brought coffee once, left it on the front steps with a sticky note that read, "No expectations. Just trying." The next day, it was gone, and though she never acknowledged it, he took it as a sign she'd accepted the gesture. He showed up again, and again after that. Emily didn't make things easy. She kept her distance, emotionally and physically, and barely said more than a polite nod when their paths crossed. But he saw the shift, slow and subtle. The way she didn't turn away as quickly when their eyes met. The way she let Chloe wave to him without pulling her back. The way she once lingered just a few seconds longer than necessary outside the clinic, pretending to check her phone. It was Chloe who cracked the wall first. One afternoon, while Emily was talking to another nurse, Chloe walked up to Liam, who had been sitting on a nearby bench, pretending to read emails. She stood in front of him, hands behind her back, then pointed at his shoes. "They're really shiny," she said seriously. He smiled. "You think so?" She nodded. "My mom says shiny shoes mean someone's trying too hard." Liam laughed despite himself. "She's not wrong." Chloe tilted her head. "You're here a lot." "I guess I am," he said. "Are you here for my mom?" "I'm here for both of you," he answered honestly. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if that was allowed. Then she shrugged. "Okay. But I don't like coffee. If you bring something, bring hot chocolate." Liam didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about how casually she'd spoken to him, how natural it had felt. He didn't dare let himself believe too quickly, but that one moment gave him more hope than anything else in the last 4 years. The next day, he brought hot chocolate. 2 cups. One for Chloe with extra whipped cream, and one for Emily, with her name written on the lid. She didn't say thank you, but she took the drink. And that was enough. He began learning their rhythms. When Chloe was more talkative, when Emily was exhausted after long shifts, which days they walked to the park after work and which days they headed straight home. He never pushed. He never asked for more. He simply made himself available, one steady presence in their lives. And over time, Emily began to let her guard down. One rainy Thursday, Liam offered to walk them to their car with an umbrella. Emily, caught off guard by the sudden downpour, accepted without much of a fight. As they walked, Chloe asked if he had any kids. Liam hesitated, then said quietly, "Not that I've known about." Emily glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Chloe nodded. "That's good. Then maybe you won't forget me." Neither adult responded, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the rain. Later that night, Liam sat in his apartment, looking out at the city skyline, thinking about that simple sentence. "Maybe you won't forget me." The truth hit harder than he expected. Chloe already felt him lingering in her life, somewhere between stranger and something more, and she didn't know whether to trust it yet. But she noticed. She wanted to believe. Liam couldn't escape the weight of what that meant. That she had gone 4 years never knowing him, and yet something inside her was open to the idea. It made him want to fight harder. Emily called him the next morning. It was the first time she had called him in years. "Can you meet us at the park?" she asked, her voice quiet. He said yes before she could even explain. They met near the swings. Chloe was running around with other kids, laughing, her curls bouncing as she moved. Emily stood with her arms crossed, not defensive, just guarded. "I didn't call because I changed my mind," she said. "I called because I need to understand what you're doing." "I'm trying," he replied. "Trying to do what, exactly? Be in her life? Mine? Make yourself feel better?" He took a breath. "I don't need to feel better. I need to be accountable." Emily looked away, watching Chloe chase another little girl across the grass. "You can't make up for 4 years." "I know," he said. "But I can show up for the next 4. And every year after that." She was quiet for a long time. Then, still not looking at him, she said, "She doesn't know you might be her father." The air between them changed instantly. It felt sharp, electric, like something big had just been spoken aloud for the first time. "I suspected," Liam said gently. "She was a baby when I left," Emily whispered. "And after what happened, I didn't trust you. I didn't want to go through a test, or a fight. I just wanted to raise her in peace." "I understand. But now..." She hesitated. "Now she's asking questions. And I don't want to lie to her." Liam felt his heart clench. "So what happens now?" Emily finally turned to him, and in her eyes he saw fear, but also honesty. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "But if you really want to know her, if you're serious, then maybe it's time we all stop pretending." He didn't answer with words. He simply nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. Because deep down, he knew this was the beginning of something that could change everything. And this time, he wouldn't run. Liam had never approached anything in his life without a plan, but when it came to Chloe, all the structure he had once relied on fell away. This wasn't about negotiation or strategy, it was about presence. Real, consistent presence. After that conversation in the park, something between him and Emily shifted. She wasn't exactly welcoming, but she wasn't shutting him out anymore either. She allowed him into their world in small doses, weekend mornings at the playground, quick dinners at a nearby cafe, the occasional drop-off or pick-up from preschool. Everything was tentative, like she was testing him. And he understood why. He'd given her every reason to doubt him. But this time, he didn't flinch under the weight of her caution. He welcomed it. Because the only way forward was to earn what he had thrown away. Chloe, on the other hand, didn't carry the same fear. She was curious, bright, unfiltered in the way only children could be. She started drawing pictures of the three of them, stick figures with labeled names, always with a sun in the corner and big, lopsided smiles. She told her teacher at school that Liam was her friend who always comes back, and something about that crushed him and healed him at the same time. He wasn't her father yet in name, but she already sensed he was something steady, something permanent. And that was more than he deserved. One evening, Emily invited him to join them at a small school event. Chloe's class had a family night, where students presented little art projects and sang songs about community. Liam arrived early, dressed in a navy sweater instead of his usual pressed suit, holding a small bouquet of daisies for Chloe. When she spotted him in the hallway, she ran full speed down the corridor and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You came," she said, as if there had been any doubt. He knelt down and handed her the flowers, watching her eyes light up. "You got my favorite," she beamed. Emily stood nearby, watching the exchange quietly. She didn't say much at first, but he noticed her expression soften, just slightly, the way it always did when Chloe was happy. The classroom was filled with parents and colorful construction paper crafts taped to the walls. Chloe's drawing of "my family" was pinned to the board by the window. Liam saw it before she said anything. 3 figures. One with long brown hair, labeled Mommy. One smaller, with curls and a pink dress, Me. And one taller figure, drawn with dark hair and blue dots for eyes, labeled simply, Liam. He stood in front of the picture longer than he meant to. Emily joined him, her voice quiet. "She drew that without telling me. I didn't know she had started putting your name down." "I didn't ask her to," he said gently. "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." After the performance, they shared a quiet meal in a diner nearby. Chloe fell asleep in the booth before dessert came, her head on Emily's shoulder, a crayon still clutched in her hand. Liam watched them both and realized how easily this could have never happened. How close he had come to walking past that gala and never knowing what he had missed. "I think we should do the test," Emily said suddenly. He looked up. "What?" "The paternity test," she said, eyes on her sleeping daughter. "It's time." He swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Not because I need confirmation. I already know. But one day she's going to ask, and I want to be able to give her the truth, not a guess, not a maybe. Something real." He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Whatever the result says, I'm not walking away." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm ready." The next week, they went together. Liam insisted they go to a private clinic where things would be handled discreetly. Emily held Chloe's hand the entire time while Liam answered forms, his hand trembling slightly as he signed them. The test was simple, just a cheek swab, and Chloe didn't even flinch. "Is this like science?" she asked, and Liam chuckled. "Exactly like science," he said. They were told the results would take a few days. It felt like waiting for a verdict, even though his heart already knew. Those 3 days were the longest of his life. He avoided his office, turned off his phone, and stayed close to home. Every knock at the door or buzz of his phone made his pulse spike. When the envelope finally arrived, he didn't open it right away. Instead, he drove to Emily's apartment. She was already waiting, Chloe coloring on the floor while a movie played quietly in the background. He handed her the envelope, but she shook her head. "You should open it," she said. With trembling hands, he tore the paper, pulled out the single page, and read the words that made his breath catch: "Probability of paternity, 99.999%. His throat tightened, and his eyes filled before he could stop them. Emily stepped closer, resting a hand gently on his arm. He looked up, voice breaking. "She's mine." "She always was," she said softly. Chloe looked up from the floor, not understanding the full gravity of what had just been confirmed, but smiling at the way her mother and Liam were standing close together. "Are we gonna celebrate now?" she asked. Liam knelt beside her and pulled her into his arms. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "We are." And in that moment, surrounded by crayons and cartoons and soft yellow light, Liam Blake finally understood what it meant to have everything. And more importantly, what it meant to fight for it. Liam thought the test would change everything, that knowing the truth would immediately give him a rightful place in Chloe's life, but instead, it made the reality heavier. He had proof now, undeniable, scientific, but still no roadmap for how to step into fatherhood after 4 years of absence. There were no guidebooks for reclaiming time you had lost, no guaranteed way to build trust with a child whose early memories didn't include you. What the test gave him was permission. What he needed to earn was belonging. Emily was quiet in the days that followed. She didn't pull away, but she didn't rush toward anything either. She watched him carefully, the same way someone might observe a fragile truce, wondering when or if it would break. She let him pick Chloe up from preschool one afternoon, and the teacher had smiled at him and said, "She talks about you a lot now. You must be pretty special." That moment hit him harder than he'd expected. He realized, standing in that hallway covered in crayon drawings and alphabet posters, that he wasn't fighting for something abstract. He was fighting for bedtime stories, for lost birthdays, for little fingers gripping his hand at crosswalks and innocent questions at dinner. One evening, after Chloe had gone to bed, Liam and Emily sat together on the worn-out couch in her apartment, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. He watched her as she scrolled through pictures on her phone, images of Chloe as a baby, learning to walk, painting with her hands, dressed as a pumpkin for Halloween. Every photo was a tiny wound, beautiful and painful. Liam had missed all of it. "I should have been there," he said quietly. Emily didn't answer right away. Then she looked up and said, "You weren't ready." He nodded slowly. "I wasn't. But I still should have tried." "You're here now," she said. "And she knows it." They sat like that for a while, no promises, no dramatic declarations, just two people slowly acknowledging what was still broken and what could maybe be rebuilt. Over the next few weeks, Liam integrated himself into their daily lives in small, consistent ways. He helped Chloe with puzzles, read her books she made him repeat 3 times in a row, packed her lunch when Emily was running late, and even started learning how to braid her hair, which Chloe found hilarious and endearing. He didn't try to replace anything. He just became part of what was already there. A new layer. A steady rhythm. Emily began to let down pieces of her armor. One morning, she called him in a panic because Chloe had a fever and she had to leave for a hospital shift. Liam didn't hesitate. He spent the whole day with her, making soup, building pillow forts, and watching cartoons. By evening, Chloe was asleep on his chest, and Emily returned home to find them tangled together on the couch, a quiet peace between them. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes shining. "You didn't have to stay all day," she whispered. Liam smiled softly. "I wasn't going anywhere." Another night, they had dinner together, just the two of them, for the first time in years. They didn't talk about the past. Instead, they spoke about Chloe's love for dinosaurs, the fundraiser Emily was organizing at the hospital, and the small garden Liam had started on his rooftop, which Chloe insisted he name the Butterfly Farm. It was the first time Emily laughed in front of him in a long while, really laughed, with her whole face, like she forgot for a moment what had come before. After dessert, when the check came and he reached for it, she touched his wrist gently. "You don't always have to prove something," she said. "It's not about proving," he replied. "It's about being here. It's about showing up every day until it's just expected." Emily looked at him for a long time. "You're not the same person I left." He met her gaze without flinching. No. I hope I'm not. They left the restaurant in silence, but it wasn't awkward. The air between them had changed, thicker with possibility. On the walk back, Chloe called them from Emily's phone just to say goodnight, and when Liam said, "I love you," Chloe replied with a sleepy, automatic "love you too," before hanging up. It was small. But it was everything. That night, Liam stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the lights of the city pulse and flicker. His life had always been defined by his ability to build and win, to control outcomes. But now, the most valuable thing he had was something he couldn't force or buy. It had to be nurtured, slowly, honestly. He had never felt more vulnerable. Or more alive. He didn't know what the next chapter would hold. But he knew he would be there to write it, with them. The season began to change. The first signs of spring appeared in the city, soft greens blooming on trees, longer days, and the kind of breeze that hinted at warmth instead of warning of cold. Liam felt it in his own life too, this subtle shift, this quiet thaw. Things between him and Emily were no longer stuck in limbo. They weren't defined by regret or defensiveness anymore, but by something far more complex and fragile, rebuilding. He knew how to rebuild companies, reputations, fortunes, but rebuilding trust, rebuilding family, that was new territory. And still, he met it the only way he knew how, fully, relentlessly, with everything he had. He and Emily weren't officially together, not in the way people expected when they heard "the father is back in the picture." There were no labels, no declarations, and no public acknowledgement of what they were or what they were becoming. But they were together in the way that mattered. She let him in. He was there for school pickups, for doctor's appointments, for bedtime stories and early Saturday mornings filled with spilled cereal and cartoons. Sometimes, after Chloe had gone to sleep, they sat together on her small couch, their shoulders brushing, and watched old movies without saying a word. Sometimes they talked about nothing, books, headlines, silly things Chloe had said that day. Sometimes, they didn't need to speak at all. One Sunday afternoon, Chloe asked if they could go to the botanical gardens. Emily had a late shift, so Liam took her alone. He packed snacks, found her favorite sweater, and even remembered to bring tissues because the last time they went, Chloe had cried when a butterfly landed on her head. At the gardens, she ran ahead, darting from flower to flower, her curiosity boundless. She told him about colors, about which ones made her feel happy or sleepy or brave. And when they sat under a tree near the koi pond, she looked up at him and said, "You're my dad, right?" Liam froze. She had never said it out loud before, never asked it directly. His throat tightened. He looked at her, those wide blue eyes watching him so seriously, so earnestly, as if she'd been carrying that question for days. "Yes," he said finally. "I'm your dad." She blinked, then smiled. "I thought so." And just like that, she leaned against his side and started munching on apple slices as if it was the most normal thing in the world. When Emily came home that night, Chloe ran into her arms and announced the news. "I asked him and he said yes. He's my dad." Emily met Liam's eyes across the room, and for the first time, she didn't flinch at the word. She nodded and whispered, "He is." That moment solidified something. It gave shape to everything they had been dancing around. It wasn't about paternity tests anymore. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about stepping into the roles they had long resisted out of fear. And Liam, for the first time, allowed himself to truly feel it. He was a father. And he wanted, more than anything, to be a partner too. He started spending more nights at their apartment. Sometimes he slept on the couch, sometimes not. He started leaving spare clothes in a drawer. Chloe began calling him for everything: lost socks, scary dreams, help opening juice boxes. Emily didn't resist. She let it happen. Slowly, steadily, it began to feel like a family. But not everyone saw it that way. One evening, Emily's sister Rachel visited. She hadn't seen Liam since the days before the breakup, and when she walked in and found him in the kitchen cooking dinner, she stiffened immediately. "What is he doing here?" she asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Emily put down the book she was reading and stood up. "He's been helping with Chloe." Rachel scoffed. "Helping? Are we pretending the last 4 years didn't happen?" Liam didn't respond. He just kept stirring the pot on the stove, hands tight around the spoon. Emily walked over to her sister, calm but firm. "I'm not pretending anything. I remember every minute of what happened. But I also see who he is now. And I know what he means to Chloe." "She doesn't need someone who walked away," Rachel said, her voice sharp. "She needs someone who came back and stayed," Emily countered. "And that's exactly what he's doing." Rachel left soon after, clearly unconvinced. Liam didn't say a word about it. He didn't try to defend himself. But later that night, when Emily found him on the balcony, he looked at her and said, "I know I still have to prove I deserve this." "You don't have to prove it to her," Emily said. "Just keep proving it to us." That week, Liam began the process of changing his will, adding Chloe as his legal heir. He started a college fund in her name. He spoke with a lawyer about the possibility of legal recognition, not out of ego or claim, but because he wanted to be there in every official way, not just in the quiet moments. Emily hesitated at first, not out of fear but out of instinct to protect, but when she saw how serious he was, how much this wasn't about control or erasing the past, she agreed to move forward. They told Chloe together, sitting on the rug in her bedroom surrounded by stuffed animals. Liam explained what it meant, and when he said, "This just means I'll always be there. No matter what," Chloe nodded solemnly and said, "Okay. But you already are." That night, after she fell asleep, Liam held Emily's hand as they sat at the foot of the bed. "She knows we're hers," he said quietly. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "And I think I'm starting to believe you're ours." Outside, the city buzzed like it always did. But inside that room, it was quiet. Peaceful. Real. And for the first time in years, Liam didn't feel like he was chasing something lost. He felt like he was home. Spring gave way to early summer, and the city transformed with it. Sidewalk cafes filled, children's laughter echoed from parks, and the sun lingered later in the sky. For Liam, the longer days felt symbolic. His time with Chloe and Emily was no longer divided between moments borrowed and moments earned, it had become natural, like a rhythm that didn't need rehearsing anymore. Chloe began introducing him to strangers as "my dad," not just with shy glances but with pride, as if she were claiming something she'd always known in her heart. And Liam never corrected her. He never would. Still, for all the light that had begun to filter back into their lives, there were shadows that hadn't entirely disappeared. Liam knew that healing wasn't linear. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in fits and starts, in sudden bursts of hope followed by unexpected fear. And sometimes it showed up as silence. Emily had been quiet for days. Not distant, not cold, just quieter. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She lay awake at night longer than usual, her breathing just slightly uneven, her thoughts clearly racing. One night, after Chloe had gone to sleep, Liam finally asked, "What's going on in your head?" Emily didn't answer right away. Then she stood and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly. "I don't know how this works. With us. With you." Liam got up and joined her, standing close but not touching. "We don't need to figure it out all at once." "I know," she whispered. "But it scares me. Because I let myself believe this could work. And the last time I believed in us, it nearly broke me. He understood. Her fear wasn't irrational. It was earned. Trust wasn't a switch to be flipped, and love didn't erase history. It simply asked you to carry it better. I don't want to hurt you again, he said. That's my fear. She looked up at him, finally meeting his eyes. Then what are we doing? Liam reached for her hand, slowly. We're trying. And we keep trying. Every day. For a long time, Emily said nothing. Then she nodded and leaned into him, not fully, but enough. And that was all the answer he needed. The following weekend, they took Chloe to the coast. A small beach town, quiet and clean, where no one knew them and nothing was expected. They stayed in a rental cottage with creaky floors and an old hammock out back. Chloe collected seashells in a plastic bucket, and Liam taught her how to skim flat stones across the surface of the water. They roasted marshmallows, built sandcastles, and watched the tide come in. One night, as the sun was setting in streaks of orange and gold, Chloe ran ahead on the beach, and Emily and Liam walked behind her in the wet sand. She took his hand again. This time, it wasn't cautious. It was sure. I forgot what it felt like to feel safe, she said. He squeezed her hand. Me too. It was in that moment he knew he wanted forever. Not because of guilt, or responsibility, or because he was trying to make amends. But because he had never loved anyone the way he loved this version of them, messy, real, bruised by time but stronger for it. He didn't need perfection. He needed this. Later that night, after Chloe had fallen asleep curled up between them with sea salt still in her hair, Liam turned to Emily and said, I want to build a life with you. The kind that doesn't depend on everything being okay all the time. I want to be part of every hard thing, and every good thing. I don't want a second chance. I want the rest of my life. Emily looked at him, her face lit only by the moonlight filtering through the window. There were tears in her eyes, but her voice didn't waver. I want that too, she whispered. That night, for the first time, they didn't just share a bed. They shared a future. It was unspoken, but understood in the way they moved, the way they held each other, the way they didn't rush to define it because they didn't need to anymore. By the time they returned to the city, something between them had solidified. There were no more questions about whether he belonged. There was only what they would do with the time ahead. Liam didn't go back to his old life. He didn't want to. The boardroom could wait. The deals could wait. But Chloe's piano recital, Emily's new promotion at the hospital, their quiet dinners in the apartment lit by fairy lights, they couldn't. Those were the moments he was building his world around now. He was no longer a man trying to fix what he broke. He was a man trying to grow something lasting, something beautiful, with the woman he never stopped loving and the daughter he was just beginning to know. By the time summer faded into autumn, Liam had become part of their world so completely that the past felt like another lifetime, one they rarely had to speak of anymore. His presence was no longer an adjustment for Chloe, but an expectation. She called for him in the middle of the night when she had bad dreams, made him pinky promise to come to every school event, and saved him a seat at breakfast with her stuffed animals even when he was running late. She trusted him completely now, and that trust shaped every part of him. Emily, too, had begun to let herself relax. She no longer watched the clock when he was with Chloe or held her breath waiting for him to disappoint them. She laughed more. She let him carry part of the emotional load, let him see her when she was tired or frustrated or vulnerable. He saw her at her best and at her worst, and loved her equally in both. There were still moments when fear crept in, when the memory of what he'd done and how easily he had once walked away threatened to rise between them. But those moments were fleeting now, and they never stayed long enough to cast real doubt. Because he didn't run anymore. He showed up, again and again, until the showing up became normal, not remarkable. They moved in together quietly, not with a big announcement or dramatic gestures, but slowly, piece by piece. It started with Liam's toothbrush in the bathroom, then a drawer in the bedroom, then his name added to the lease not because they needed it but because it made things official. Chloe asked if that meant they were a real family now, and Emily had looked at her and said, "We've been a real family for a while." And it was true. Paper didn't make them a family, presence did, effort did, love did. That fall, Chloe started kindergarten. Liam took off the entire morning for her first day, standing beside Emily as they walked her into the classroom filled with tiny desks and colorful posters. Chloe wore a blue dress and had her hair tied up in 2 braids, and she held both their hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Before she let go, she looked up at them seriously and said, "You'll both be here when I come out, right?" Liam bent down to her level and said, "Always." And he meant it. The teacher took Chloe's hand and led her into the room, and Emily leaned against Liam the moment she was out of sight. She didn't even cry, she whispered, half proud and half heartbroken. "She's growing up." "She's brave," Liam said. "Like her mom." That afternoon, after school, they took her out for ice cream and let her stay up a little later than usual. It became a ritual, every milestone marked together, every hard day met as a unit. They were a team now, all 3 of them, held together by something far stronger than convenience or circumstance. They were held together by choice. One evening, just as winter was beginning to show its first breath in the air, Liam planned something quiet but meaningful. No big crowd, no flash. Just the 3 of them. He brought Emily and Chloe to the botanical gardens where they had gone months earlier, where Chloe had first asked if he was her dad. This time, the paths were lit with tiny lanterns for a winter night walk, and Chloe danced between the lights in her little coat and hat, completely unaware of what was coming. They stopped at the same bench under the same tree near the koi pond. Chloe ran ahead again, chasing her own shadow. Liam turned to Emily, heart racing. "I never thought I'd get a second chance like this," he said. "Not just with you, but with all of this, with a family, with something that actually matters." Emily smiled softly. "You made it matter." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, not flashy, not overdone, just simple and real. Her breath caught. "I know this doesn't erase the past. And I know nothing about us has been easy," he said, "but I don't want perfect. I want honest. I want the mornings when you're tired, the nights when we fight about silly things, the quiet in-between moments. I want all of it, with you. Will you marry me?" Emily didn't hesitate. She took his face in her hands and kissed him with a certainty that made the air around them still. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. From a few feet away, Chloe clapped and yelled, "Does this mean I get to throw flower petals?" They both laughed through tears, and Liam nodded. "You better believe it." The wedding was small, just family and close friends, in the spring. Chloe walked down the aisle in a little white dress with a crown of flowers, beaming like she was the star of the show, which, in many ways, she was. Emily walked alone until halfway down the aisle, when Chloe ran back and grabbed her hand, and the 2 of them walked the rest of the way together. Liam stood waiting, his heart pounding, knowing that he wasn't just marrying the woman he loved. He was stepping fully, finally, into the life he was always meant to have. There were tears, there was laughter, there was dancing late into the night. And at the end of it, as they lay curled up together in the quiet after everyone had gone, Liam held Emily's hand and kissed her temple. "You saved me," he said. Emily smiled sleepily. "No. You just remembered who you were supposed to be." And that was how their story began, not with a perfect beginning, but with 1,000 imperfect moments, stitched together by effort, faith, and the choice to keep trying. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the mistakes, not the lost time, but the love that had grown in their place. A love they would never let go of again.